Hey guys, tonight we sail beneath a honey-colored moon, where the sea smells like iron and brine, and the only thing louder than the creak of rigging is your stomach, wondering what passed for dinner on a 3rd century BCE merchant ship. You're perched on a stack of wicker baskets stuffed with dried lentils, your feet cold against the damp deck. The sky is too clear to sleep, and the air is too salty to care. Down below, someone snores with the deep, satisfied thunder of a man who ate the last fig and has no regrets. And just as your mind begins to drift, lulled by the rocking hull and the soft slap of waves, you hear it. The distant thud of oars. Not rowing, charging. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining from somewhere far away or right next door, drop your city and your local time in the comments. It's oddly satisfying to see who's drifting off alongside you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The oars beat faster now. You scramble to the bow, squinting over the dark water. The ship groans like it knows what's coming. Out there, just beyond the flicker of the oil lamp, you spotted a shadow slicing low against the waves. No lanterns, no heraldry. Just a lone skiff, swift and sharp, with the unmistakable silhouette of someone waving a pickle? Well, it looks like a pickle. Maybe a torch, possibly a cucumber-shaped club. You never were great with detail under pressure. Still, you've read the signs. These aren't just fishermen out for a joyride. They're pirates, and they want your pickles. The captain of your ship, a sunburned Corinthian named Deimos, limps to the rail. His beard is damp with seawater and maybe soup. He squints into the darkness and mutters, "Gods preserve us, not again." Apparently, this is not his first run-in with condiment-seeking criminals. You duck behind a crate as the pirates come alongside, their hull scraping yours with a painful scree. Grappling hooks flying out toward the cargo hold or the captain's quarters, but straight for a single reinforced storage box, lashed near the rear mast. You'd seen it earlier. It was marked with a faded olive branch, sealed with wax, and surrounded by a ridiculous amount of cautionary rope. One sailor even told you it was haunted by the spirit of spoiled relish. Turns out, it was a barrel of pickles. Pickled cucumbers, to be exact. Preserved in strong wine vinegar, garlic, mustard seeds, and dill imported from what's now southern Turkey. A delicacy, a luxury, a diplomatic gift, a snack, and also, apparently, a cause for bloodshed. The pirates vault over the side. They're not screaming, not pillaging, just arguing loudly. One of them holds up a scroll and shouts, "We have the manifest. Don't make this hard." Another holds out a toothless grin and gestures toward the pickle barrel, like a child asking for one more cookie before bed. You're frozen. Not in fear, though there's plenty of that, but in sheer confusion. Of all the things to die for on this soggy ship of lentils, lamp oil, and a suspicious sack of goat cheese, it's a brined vegetable that starts the mayhem. Historically speaking, piracy in the ancient Mediterranean was no joke. Merchants ran routes from Phoenicia to Sicily, dodging raiders like ants dodging raindrops. Some pirates even had official sponsorship, like privateers, except with fewer rules and more yelling. And yes, plunder usually included wine, textiles, precious metals, but food? Occasionally. Especially rare, preserved food during shortages, dried squid, salted fish, and yes, fermented vegetables. But a battle over a single barrel? That's the kind of tale historians raise eyebrows at. Some call it fiction, others a satirical fragment. There's even a theory it was a metaphor for greed, though. As you crouch behind a coil of rope watching two men tug of war over a pickle fork, it feels pretty literal. Your breath comes shallow. A pirate with braids made from seaweed grunts, hauling the barrel inch by inch toward the rail. Your shipmates protest weakly, too tired or too confused to stop him. Someone sneezes into the silence. The pirates freeze. And then, quite suddenly, someone drops the barrel. It cracks open with a wet, garlicky thud. Brine gushes across the deck like a tiny, angry tide pool. The pickles fat, green, slick with vinegar roll in all directions, like panicked sea slugs fleeing a buffet. And that's when it really kicks off. Everyone lunges. Not to fight, exactly, but to salvage. Like kids at a birthday party gone wrong, scrabbling for cake that's hit the floor. You see a merchant sailor scoop 2 pickles into his helmet. A pirate ties 3 together like nunchucks. Someone else just starts eating them, right off the deck. No shame, no regrets. And then there's you. You grab one, just one, more out of reflex than strategy. It's still cool from the barrel, surprisingly crisp. You think about keeping it. You think about offering it as a peace gesture. But mostly, you just stare at it and wonder how your life ended up here sleep-deprived, on a stolen ship, holding a snack that might get you stabbed. In the chaos, a strange figure steps onto the deck, not with the scrambling panic of the others, but with the slow, theatrical confidence of someone who once narrated his own life aloud. He's wearing what used to be a toga, now cut into dramatic strips. One boot, a wide-brimmed hat clearly stolen from a Roman senator, and in the center of his sunburned face, a glass eye that glints yellow in the moonlight. You'll remember that eye later. Right now, he bows low, almost slipping on a loose gherkin, and says, "Gentlemen, let us not spill any more brine in anger." You blink at him, the vinegar still stinging your nose. He rises from his theatrical bow, arms spread wide like he's introducing a play, and not, let's be honest here, a minor maritime disaster over fermented vegetables. One of the merchant crew mutters, "Oh no, it's him." The pirates straighten. Even your ship's captain stops mid-wheeze. The pickled nunchuck guy lowers his weapon, and a hush falls over the boat. The waves don't care. They keep sloshing. But the humans? Dead silent? "You don't know me," the man announces to the crowd, "but your grandchildren will." Oh boy. He gestures behind him, where a young pirate hoists a wooden placard painted with hasty, dripping letters. One-eyed Thesos, vinegar lord of the Cyclades. The kid holds it too high, and the wind promptly snaps it in half. A seagull shrieks. You try not to laugh, but it slips out, just a little puff of nose air. Thesa's eye swivels to you. Well, it doesn't swivel. It's glass, but you feel very seen. "I have sailed 3 days," he declares, pacing like an actor at intermission, with a crew fed on nothing but lentil paste and regret for that. He points to the now smashed pickle barrel, the last true remnant of the royal brinery of Kos. Kos, you've heard of it. An island known for wine, herbs, and questionable home remedies. The ancients there swore by fermented everything garlic wine for infections, boiled turnip juice for heartbreak. And yes, pickles. According to the scrolls of Timos of Knidos, Thesos continues, drawing an old scroll from inside his toga robe hybrid. The brining techniques of Kos could render any vegetable immortal. You raise an eyebrow. Somewhere below deck, someone hiccups. Historians still argue whether the so-called immortal pickles of Kos were metaphorical or medicinal. He says, too casually. You wonder if he's actually read those scrolls. More likely, he skimmed the first paragraph and got distracted by a doodle. But your Captain Deimos steps forward. That barrel, he says slowly, was commissioned by the Archon of Rhodes. A diplomatic gift. It wasn't for sale. Thesos tilts his head. Ah, but was it insured? No, Deimos says after a beat. This is ancient Greece. We don't have insurance. Exactly, Thesos purrs, and waves his arm in a small, victorious flourish. The pirates begin murmuring excitedly. A few start picking up the least smashed pickles and tucking them into sacks. The merchant crew bristled. The mood is turning sour pun entirely intended. You step back, heart thudding. It's not that you care about the pickles themselves, but this is clearly about more than just food. It's honor, pride, and probably a mild case of scurvy-fueled hallucination. Enough, someone shouts. It's the youngest merchant sailor, a boy barely out of adolescence, hair slicked with sweat and seawater, fists clenched. If the barrel's gone, there's nothing to fight over. Wrong thing to say. Thesos narrows his one good eye. My grandmother, he begins ominously, once told me a story about a pirate queen who lost her eye in a barrel of brine and could still see truth through vinegar. That doesn't make any sense. And she would say, Thesos continues, his voice rising, that a real pickle leaves no doubt. It resists the tooth. It sings of garlic. It weeps with history. Okay, now you're hungry. The merchant crew exchange glances. One of them nudges a half-eaten cucumber under a plank with his boot. No one knows how to respond. Then someone not you, but close enough to make you guilty by association snickers. And just like that, it's on again. There's no swords this time. Just furious gestures, shouted family recipes, and a bizarre shoving match involving a broken ladle. One pirate pulls out a pouch of capers and hurls them like bitter marbles. Someone else slaps another man with a celery stalk. You duck as the chaos resumes. The boat rocks under the strain. Above, the sail flaps like it's trying to get away from all of this. Amid the yelling, you spot something ridiculous. Thesos has produced a pickle jar from his own satchel. He holds it aloft like a sacred relic. The brine inside glows golden in the moonlight. The cucumbers bob gently, flecked with dill and a mysterious red spice. The brinery lives on, he whispers. Then he turns and hurls it across the deck. It smashes against the mast. The brine sprays outward, dousing pirates and merchants alike. Everyone freezes. Even the birds go silent. That scent, strong, acidic, unapologetic. Thesos kneels by the splinters. It was a replica, he murmurs. But symbolic, always symbolic. At this point, you're 40% sure he's actually a traveling actor who got kicked out of Athens. But something strange happens. The absurdity has escalated so far, the tension just pop. Pirate giggles. A sailor snorts. Someone starts quietly clapping. You hear one gruff man mutter, I mean, it was a good pickle. You exhale. Not relief exactly. More like disbelief wrapped in exhaustion. But the violence seems to have been replaced with embarrassment and confusion. You wander over to the ship's side, and look out at the black waves. Somewhere out there, other ships are probably making real history-moving troops, signing treaties, trading gold. And here you are, covered in brine, and listening to a man with a lemon slice eye talk about the mystical pH balance of destiny. A soft splash beside the boat draws your attention. It's a lone pickle. Bobbing in the sea like it, too, is trying to escape this narrative. You watch it for a long moment. Maybe it is immortal. Thesos stands slowly, his hands sticky with brine and maybe drama. He seems unfazed by the busted jar, the rising tide of pickle-slick sailors, or the fact that the moon has begun dipping toward the sea like it's trying to politely exit this story. "I didn't come here for violence," he says, tugging at his sea-damp robe like a toga-clad philosopher. "I came for a tribute." And then, because the man clearly thrives on theatrical tension, he raises one hand and snaps. Two pirates emerge from the smaller skiff tied to the side of your ship, carrying something between them, a ceremonial platter of some kind, carved from dark wood and ringed with olive leaves. On it rests a glimmering object that catches the moonlight with an eerie yellow glow. Another pickle. This one, unlike the others, has been preserved. Not just in the sense of vinegar. It sits encased in clear resin amber, maybe. A cucumber forever sealed mid-pucker, trapped in time like a bug in Jurassic Park. You'd laugh, but something about the way the pirates kneel makes you hesitate. Thesos lifts it with both hands. "Behold," he breathes, "the eye of Akritos." The crew murmurs. The name's familiar, vaguely. You think back to your studies, or possibly a particularly strange tavern story, and recall an old tale. Akritos, a rogue philosopher pirate who claimed that human emotion could be fermented like food. He was said to have experimented with pickling not just cucumbers, but symbols, objects of sentiment stored in jars, left to steep in time and vinegar. Supposedly, it sharpened memory, preserved meaning. Or maybe that was a fever dream brought on by moldy cheese. Still, the pickle glows unnaturally, probably due to whatever strange mix of spices and superstition was sealed into that jar 2 generations ago. This, Thesos continues, was passed down by the Vinegar Guild of Delos, who in turn inherited it from the culinary mystics of Crete. He smiles, revealing a single gold tooth. It is not just a pickle, it is true. A merchant sailor leans toward you and whispers, "I think it's just a cucumber someone dropped in resin." Fair? Thesos raises it higher. "I propose a challenge," he calls out. "A fair and honorable duel, not of weapons, but of taste." You are not ready for that. Apparently, no one else was either. There's a confused pause, then someone mutters, "Taste?" "Yes," Thesos affirms, as if that were a perfectly reasonable follow-up to a failed hijacking. 3 contenders, 1 pickle each. The crew shall judge. It sounds absurd. It is absurd, but also safer than swords? The merchants glance at Demos, who sighs, mutters something about getting too old for this fermented nonsense, and shrugs. "Fine," he says, "but I'm not eating anything that came off your ship. Then you may submit your own." Thesos replies smoothly, "From your stores." A crate is opened. Inside, several wrinkled cucumbers floating in suspiciously murky brine. They've probably been there since before you boarded. One of the sailors wrinkles his nose and says, "They've got notes of shoes." "Perfect," Thesos grins. A third pickle is selected from a neutral source. the captain's private stash, hidden behind sacks of barley. It's suspiciously well preserved, glistening with confidence. Deimos glares. That was for my birthday. Sacrifices must be made, Thesos intones, placing all 3 pickles, yours, his, and the ship's, on a cloth-wrapped barrel between the crews. Now the debate begins. Not about taste not yet, but about criteria. Thesos insists that crunch must be judged first, followed by aroma, then spiritual resonance. One of the merchants argues for firmness and garlic balance. A pirate claims his aunt could commune with the dead using only dill. Historians still argue whether ancient culinary guilds had ceremonial tastings or whether these were later inventions, retellings that layered performance onto simple traditions. But at this moment, they're real enough. You're appointed a taster. You tried to protest, but Thesos dramatically places his hat on your head and declares you palate of the gods. And now everyone's clapping. Great. First, the merchant pickle. It's squishy, salty. Not bad if you're into footnotes and regret. You nod solemnly. Next, the captain's pickle. Crisp, tart. A touch of honey, maybe? He raises his eyebrows when you say, surprisingly balanced. Finally, Aces. You bite into it, and for a moment, just a second, you get it. There's spice, there's depth. There's something warm and earthy under the bite, like it was aged in wine barrels lined with poetry. Or maybe you're just very tired. You announce your rankings, and the rest of the crew murmurs their agreement. It's close, closer than you'd expect. But in the end, the captain's pickle secret birthday gift and all wins. Thesos bows, removes his hat, and shockingly grins. Fair is fair, he says. And then, with a sigh, he turns to his crew. Prepare the tribute. A small chest is brought forth. Inside, a tangle of herbs, 3 loaves of fig bread, and a pouch of bronze coins. He hands it to Deimos with a small flourish. Payment, he says, for the journey and the pickle. The tension releases like a popped cork. Pirates begin helping mop the brine. Someone ties the broken railing. One man retrieves a wayward caper from under a sandal. As the 2 captains speak quietly at the bow, you sit back down on your lentil crates and stare at the empty sky. Dace's glowing pickle sits beside you, still sealed, untasted, untouchable. And for the first time in hours, the ship is quiet. You think maybe, just maybe, that glass-eyed pirate knew what he was doing all along. Then a seagull lands next to you and tries to steal your shoe. You try to shoot the seagull with the gentlest motion possible, because no one wants to reawaken hostilities over footwear, but it just stares at you, neck craned, feathers ruffled like a tiny, arrogant diplomat. You toss it a stray olive. It squawks once, offended, and flaps off toward the mast. All around you, the 2 crews now mingle, exhausted from absurdity. Pickle-stained shirts hang like battle flags from the rigging. Someone's retelling the duel of the brines with increasingly creative flourishes, and you're fairly certain you just heard a version where one of the pickles had a prophecy carved into it. You wander toward the quarterdeck, where Thesos and Captain Deimos are deep in conversation, speaking in low tones that mix frustration with reluctant admiration. You catch snippets. Not the worst boarding I've seen. And then he just licked the mast. And next time, use an olive branch, not a spear. But before you can eavesdrop any more effectively, a familiar voice pipes up beside you. You know what this reminds me of? Says a pirate with a crooked tooth and a voice like gravel steeped in honey. The time we chased a Roman grain ship for 3 days over a barrel of fermented beets. You blink. Was it worth it? No, he says, not even close. Gave 3 men food poisoning and a goat temporary blindness. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Mediterranean sailors believed fermented root vegetables could ward off seasickness. Others claimed they summoned hallucinations of sea gods. Neither theory worked particularly well in practice. Still, tales abound half-true, half-salted. And tonight, they're flowing as freely as spilled brine. You wander through knots of sailors, sharing their own stories of absurd thefts. One crew once stole an entire basket of leeks and painted them gold to pass off as tribute. Another proudly recounts a prank where they smuggled pickled onions into a Spartan war camp and pretended they were sacred relics. Historians still argue whether piracy in the Aegean was as whimsical as the legends claim, someone nearby says. But the fact remains sailors would steal anything that wasn't nailed down. And sometimes even then. Eventually, the pickles become a metaphor. A young sailor from your crew face sunburned, hair slicked back with seawater, and ambition leans over the rail and mutters, "You ever think it's not about the food? It's about the idea of the food?" You squint. What, like culinary philosophy? Sort of, he says. Like we're all just floating here, waiting to rot. But if you can preserve something, even just a cucumber maybe, it means the voyage wasn't pointless. You stare at him. Then you stare at the remaining pickles. Then you wonder if someone spiked the water. A loud argument breaks out near the foredeck. 2 pirates are nose to nose, voices low but tense. The taller one waves a pickle spear, while the shorter one insists that capers do count as pickles. Because they're brined, aren't they? You step closer, curiosity piqued. The conversation is ridiculous, but oddly passionate. The crux of the debate? Definition. What is a pickle? You never thought you'd end up contemplating this under a Greco-Roman sky. But here you are, leaning against a barrel while ancient seafarers discuss fermentation taxonomy. One sailor insists a true pickle must begin its life as a cucumber and end its journey steeped in vinegar. Another argues for salt brine and fermentation, no vinegar involved. A third, possibly sleep-deprived, suggests that anything preserved with emotion and intent qualifies even memories. Thesos joins in, of course. He declares, with total seriousness, a pickle is anything that survives what it wasn't meant to. And then he turns to you. What say you, O palate of the gods? You freeze. All eyes shift you away. You weren't prepared for a philosophical referendum. You glance at the nearest pickle, a stubby, lopsided thing clinging to a splinter of barrel. You think of the chaos, the glass eye, the standoff, the seagull. The resin pickle is still sitting untouched near your crate, and you say, carefully, I think, if it survived this long and still tastes good, it's probably a pickle. There's a beat of silence. Then someone claps, slowly, sarcastically. But then others join in, and before you know it, a very confusing cheer rises around you. Apparently, you've just helped resolve a centuries-old food classification debate, using logic only slightly better than bedtime fortune cookies. Still, it does the trick. Tensions ease again. One of the pirates ceremoniously offers a caper to the sailor he was arguing with. It's accepted with solemnity. You'd laugh, but the air has shifted again, softer, sleepier. Somewhere near the stern, someone begins to hum, a low, wordless tune that rises and falls like the tide. You don't recognize it, but it settles into the quiet like it's always been there. You walk back toward your usual spot, careful not to step on any loose herbs or sleeping sailors. The sky is beginning to blush at the edges, a watercolor wash of indigo and orange. No one's sure exactly when night gave way to morning. You find your crate. You sit. The seagull is back, but this time it just eyes you like a roommate who's given up on personal space. Next to you, Thesos is curled up with his glass-eyed face pointed toward the stars, snoring gently. You look at him, this self-declared vinegar lord, part fool, part oracle, and you wonder, did he really come for Pickles? Or just a story? Maybe both. The rigging creaks overhead like an old man settling into a bath, and you lie back against a bag of barley that smells faintly of figs and mildew. It's been a long night. You don't remember when you last slept, but your bones feel as brined as the deck. The seagull has settled beside you like an emotionally unavailable cat. All seems calm, until a voice thin, nasal, and very confident says, "We're keeping the pickle." You open one eye. A short pirate with impressively wild eyebrows and an embroidered vest stands center deck, arms folded, chest puffed out like a rooster preparing for a motivational speech. He's backed by 3 other pirates, and inexplicably, a very nervous-looking goat. Deimos groans from where he's seated. "Which pickle?" "The resin one," the pirate says, pointing dramatically at the eye of Akratos, which now sits nestled in a coil of rope like some holy relic in timeout. "You mean the one that doesn't even open?" Deimos asks, incredulous. "Symbolism matters," the pirate replies, "and Captain Thesos is asleep, so leadership falls to the next most emotionally volatile person." "Oh no," says a merchant sailor. "It's a mutiny." Over a pickle. Again, the short pirate clears his throat. "I challenge the terms of truce. I call for the right of the great caper." A collective groan ripples across both crews. Apparently, this is a thing. You ask a nearby sailor what that means, and he whispers, "It's like rock, paper, scissors, but with a lot more shouting and a small chance of sea shanties." You stare. Ancient pirate traditions, it seems, were equal parts nonsense and deeply sacred. The right of the great caper is said to originate from a crew stranded near Cyprus who resolved a heated dispute over sea snail. Rights by throwing fermented capers at each other until someone slipped and fell into a moral epiphany. Historians still argue whether this rite was an actual tradition, or just what happened when drunk sailors tried to codify party games into maritime law. Either way, tonight, it's back. Rules? Someone asks, half hoping the answer is none. But the short pirate is prepared. 3 rounds, he says. First, a caper toss, then a contest of vinegar spitting distance, and finally ... philosophical debate. You blink. What kind of philosophical debate? He grins. A big one. Does the soul ferment? You should have stayed in bed. And somehow, because no one else wants to, you get drafted again. Because you're neutral. Because you're the palate of the gods. Because apparently, this ship is determined to turn your insomnia into legend. So now you're holding a caper between your thumb and index finger like a sacred artifact, facing off against the pirate with the goat, who introduces himself as Lysocrates the briny. Round 1. The toss. You both hurl your capers toward a bucket set up mid-deck. Yours lands just short. His hits the rim, bounces, and rolls dramatically into a sleeping sailor's sandal. A draw, round 2. Vinegar spit. They hand you a thimble of red wine vinegar. You do your best. It arcs through the air and lands with a satisfying sizzle on the deck. Lysicrate spits his. It flies high, impressively ... and lands directly on the goat. The goat makes a noise that implies a lawsuit. You win that round. Tension builds. Then it's time for round 3. You're seated cross-legged, eye to eye with Lysicrates, the eye of Acritos balanced between you. So, he says, voice hushed, can a soul ferment? You glance around. The entire ship has gathered to watch. Someone has brought olives. Another is sketching this moment in charcoal. Deimos leans against the mast, muttering, "Why is this my life?" You clear your throat. Well, you begin. Fermentation is the transformation of something simple into something complex, something richer. Maybe even more. ... alive. A few people nod. But too long, you add, and it spoils. Lysicrates tilts his head. So, you're saying souls are cucumbers? You shrug. All I know is, we've been arguing all night over one. And somehow, none of us are rotten yet. The crowd is silent. Then, applause. Real applause. Someone even starts tapping on a tambourine they definitely didn't have 2 minutes ago. Lysicrates bows his head. Accepted, he says. The eye stays neutral. You both rise. The rite is complete. As you walk away, Thesos stirs, rubbing his face. Did I miss the mutiny again? A small one, someone says. He grins. Good. They're better without me. The 2 crews begin packing up. The sky's warming. A soft wind rises. It smells of salt, fennel, and something that might actually be optimism. You glance at the eye of Acritos, still perched between the ropes. No longer a prize, just a symbol. Of what? You're not entirely sure. Maybe resilience. Maybe absurdity. Maybe that, in a world of storms and oars and wild gods, it's okay to find meaning in something as simple as a sour vegetable. The goat sneezes. You take that as a sign of approval. The sun finally stretches its golden fingers across the deck, casting long, buttery light over the scattered chaos of the night before. Sailcloth glows softly, like parchment backlit by fire, and everything looks gentler somehow. Even the brine-sticky ropes seem to sigh in relief. You stretch, feeling every bone pop like a chorus of reluctant barnacles. Nearby, someone is humming again, low, slow, almost reverent now. Theseus lounges beside the mast, his hat shading half his face, glass eye gleaming faintly in the morning light. You sit beside him, not because you have anything profound to say, but because sometimes the quietest company is the best kind. Did we win? He asks without opening his eyes. I think everyone lost and somehow came out better for it, you reply. He chuckles. That's the Pickle way. A small crowd gathers mid-deck. Not for a fight this time, but to decide what to do with the eye of Acritos. No one wants to keep it. Exactly. But no one wants to toss it overboard either. It's become something else now. I say we bury it, Deimos mutters, arms crossed. Find an island, put it under a fig tree, let it age in peace. Too poetic, says a pirate. We should launch it into the sea with a tiny sail. Let it find its next victim. You watch them bicker, but this time it's playful. The kind of arguing done with arms crossed and eyebrows raised, not fists clenched. Eventually, they settle on a compromise. The eye will stay in a wooden box in the ship's pantry, labeled "Do Not Eat Important." It'll travel, witness, maybe one day, be discovered by a confused archaeologist, wondering why there's a resin-encased pickle nestled next to a sack of nutmeg. You help stow the box. You pat it once before closing the lid. It feels strange, but comforting. Like sealing away a ridiculous memory you'll never quite believe was real. Thesos, now fully awake and combing pickle bits out of his beard, raises a chunk of sea biscuit in salute. To brine and to the brave. The crews cheer quietly, sleepily. You suspect half of them won't remember most of what happened. Just flashes. Crunching, shouting, the goat, maybe you. As the pirates begin lowering their skiff, preparing to row back to wherever they call home, one stops and hands you a gift. A single pickle, perfectly packed in a small clay jar, sealed with wax and tied with twine. For later, he says, tapping the side, or never, whichever suits. You pocket it, not because you need it, but because, well, after everything, it just seems right. As the ships drift apart, the breeze picks up, ruffling your hair. Damos slaps your shoulder once, mutters, "Good work, philosopher," and returns to yelling about sail tension. You find your lentil crate again. Sit, the world feels quieter now. The chaos is over, but its echo remains, soft and silly in your bones. You close your eyes. And finally, after one very long, very vinegary night, you sleep. The deck rocks gently beneath you. Now just a cradle on the open sea. The wind is soft, and it carries no oaths or curses anymore, just the breath of morning, feathering through the rigging like an old lullaby. Far off, gulls call, but even they seem subdued, as if reluctant to interrupt what's become a fragile calm. Around you, the ship dozes. Boots dangle from hammocks. Half-mumbled dreams mix with the creak of wood and the steady shush of water against the hull. Everything is slow now, easy. The adrenaline, the vinegar, the wild declarations of fermented glory, all of it fades like mist under the rising sun. And maybe that's the point. Even ridiculous things like fighting over pickles, naming yourself the vinegar lord of the Cyclades, debating whether souls can ferment, can still be wrapped in something meaningful, something shared. A story you'll tell only when the stars are out, and no one's in a hurry. Your eyes are closed. Your breath has slowed. And somewhere deep in the ship's pantry, wrapped in cloth and secrets, a silly old pickle waits quietly for the next strange chapter. Let it. You're done now. Let the sea rock you gently. Let the air settle into softness. Let your thoughts drift away like little ships without sails, bobbing toward the edge of dream. It's over. You're safe. You're still. You're home. Sleep well, sailor.